Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Russ, and I'm joined by my good mate over there in Minnesota, Ed Anderson. How you doing today, Ed?
Living the dream, Robbie. Are you sure you still remember how to use the StreamYard buttons here? It's been a few days.
I'm trying to figure out how to use the live button. We haven't been live here for a little while. Ladies and gentlemen, you might have noticed we haven't been live, and the reason for that is we kind of shifted gears a little bit in the way that we're recording content over on YouTube. We'll be doing a live just once a week from now on, and all of the content that we record is pre-recorded but uploaded daily. So we've got a couple of videos for you daily, usually 2 or 3 that head out on the Unspoken Truth channel, but then there's also some shorts content that goes out there as well. So make sure you come on over to the Unspoken Truth YouTube channel, and make sure you head over and follow us as a podcast over on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever you get your audio content. We're also available on Telegram and Twitter, and Rumble is our backup as well in case we get shushed up here and censored from speaking the truth on YouTube. What do you say, Ed? It's so far so good. We've been near the electric fence a few times, but nothing bad's happened.
Yeah, so far so good. I'll whisper this. I can't believe we've gotten away with some of the stuff that we've talked about. But
I'm surprised as well. I was a little bit worried yesterday. We were right up against the electric fence yesterday, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't see that show, make sure you head on over to the Unspoken Truth YouTube channel, and you can see the videos we were talking about. It's the next potential climate change pandemic / lockdown / government control / I don't know, whatever they want to try and do to us. It's like ridiculous. The cops are going to come out and beat you with a baton because you're talking shit on YouTube or something like that. But yeah, all is well in the YouTube land when there's no censorship or copyright strikes or anything like that going on as yet. I saw a YouTuber that I follow. I've been following for a few years. His name's Luke Rizowski, and he has a little kind of community and a movement called We Are Change. I've been following that for a few years. And he got shit canned because he put a review up of The Sound of Freedom.
Ooh,
and he didn't get a copyright strike. He got a strike saying that you were saying things that you're not supposed to say on YouTube. And I saw that video when it came out because everyone was doing reviews of that when that movie first came out just a week or so ago, whatever it is. And he's out there not saying anything that anybody else wouldn't say. And if you look at a bunch of other YouTube channels and the interviews that Jim Caviezel and Tim Ballard were doing around the place, they were saying things that were more than what Luke was saying. And so his channel has been targeted a couple of times, and then they canned him completely from YouTube. He's been on YouTube for 15 years, and I was following this along yesterday on Twitter, and he was showing the screenshots of the back of his account, and all for doing a movie review that's outside the scope of mainstream media and away from what people would typically like to watch, like a Mission Impossible movie or a Transformers movie or something like that. So here's a movie about real life, and he's kind of just perpetuating the truth and saying what it is out there. And apparently the powers that be at YouTube didn't like it. But good news is that he said, "What did I do wrong? What did I do?" And they said, "Bad luck. You are outside the guidelines. Your channel is now kaput completely. 15 years."
Over one video.
For a movie review video, and then later in the day, it was restored. And they said, after a manual review, we've looked and you're good to go. So the algorithm there in YouTube is pretty sensitive, but they can't. I guess there's millions of people, right? They can't look at each and every single channel individually like that. So that's a difficult thing. So, but look, I'm of the belief. I don't know about you, Ed. I'm of the belief that you just got to speak your mind, man, and say the truth, and you got to accept the consequences. Self-censoring is the worst kind of censorship, and I don't want to self-censor.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more of a realist about it. I love that idea of not censoring yourself. However, given the world that we live in and given the platform that we're on, and there are rules to follow, I do always do a risk-reward analysis on what I want to talk about. So I do self-censor myself because in the bigger scheme of things, I got a lot of important things to talk about. And, I
guess I do as well, because I look at it and I think, do we even need to talk about that? Is there something else that I could talk about that's maybe not going to move me up against the electric fence? There was one more just on that unspoken truth self-censorship thing. I don't know if you saw, there's a country music artist out there who put a song out that said, I think the title of it is "Try That in My Town." And it's like a slur at Antifa come and try it in my town in Texas here, see what happens to you. And it was censored. It was banned on YouTube. It was banned on a bunch of different other platforms as well for inciting violence or some sort of bullshit like that. But then I could probably look up on YouTube here somewhere an NWA video saying fuck the police and all sorts of, nasty rap commentary going on there, but that's allowed on YouTube. But as soon as the country music white American male says something like try that in my town, and he's not inciting anything, he's just saying try that in my town, see what happens. He's just asking a question or making a statement, cancel.
I think that the audience is pretty smart and they realize what's going on. And so there are ways of getting our message across basically in code, right? We can talk about, people kind of get what we're talking about. And the fact that these platforms are censoring us and keeping us from talking about certain topics, that speaks volumes all by itself, because people read into it. And people do not like the idea that the freedom of speech is being stifled. It just naturally rubs people the wrong way. Most people, the leftists love it. They love the idea.
Aren't they traditionally the people that want free speech, though?
Well, that is their historical claim to fame, right?
The libertarian, right?
Libertarian, but the Democrat Party of 20, 30 years ago and more is not the same party as today. Okay? These people just call themselves what they are. Just call them fascism, socialism, communism. Just own it, guys. That is your belief system. So just take on the name and own it. Because that is what you are. You are fascist. So
I think it's a bit confusing for Americans when they look at Australian politics sometimes, because we have the Liberal Party, and the Liberal Party are the Conservative Party, right? So it's kind of the word American. Why are you Liberal Party? But they can, yeah, it's the opposite, right? And then we have the Labor Party. So it's based on British politics, right? So, and the Labor Party is typically a union movement. And so if you like kind of scratch on that little scab a little bit or pull at that thread a little bit, you'll see what's behind it, what happens when you take the union movement to its extent, to its nth, where you end up somewhere in socialism and ultimately you end up in somewhere in communism. That's what a union movement is. And, the famous Margaret Thatcher quote is that, socialism and communism works until you run out of other people's money. And, I can remember as a kid growing up, and we had the Treasurer of Australia, who ultimately became the Prime Minister of Australia, Paul Keating. He was the local member. And I remember driving past and seeing political signs during election times and thinking, isn't that guy the Prime Minister? Like, I didn't know anything about politics as a kid, right? And just thinking, and he happened to be the member where I lived in my area. And I remember looking at all of that and seeing it on TV, and the Labor Party was all about union movements and people like protesting, and there's these picket lines and there's people complaining and there's screaming and shouting, and it's just men and all of that. And I can remember asking my dad, like, what does all that mean? And he just like kind of rolls his eyes. And my early recollection of asking my dad about politics is him not really liking unions very much for one reason or another. And my dad worked for Qantas for 29 or 30 years or something like that, and that was a unionized workforce as well. So I think that maybe he had a bit of a negative experience there. But the Labor Party of old, of the 1960s, 70s and 80s here in Australia, is completely gone. And I think it's reflective of what you were talking about as the Democratic Party there as well. And what we're seeing here in Australia is a move towards more elitism. They seem to be very inner city elites that are running the Labor Party, and they claim that they're for unions. They claim that they're for the working class man and woman and, for the tough Aussie battler. But we don't see their policies that are really reflective of that, which I find quite interesting, because it doesn't seem like they actually leverage their foundations or their roots on a daily basis. You see some people and businesses and brands, they always come back to their roots. This is what we believe in. This is where we come from. This is why we do what we do. The Labor Party of Australia, you never hear them say anything like that anymore. It's very strange.
I've got kind of a mixed feelings about this whole topic of freedom of speech, because on the one hand, these platforms that we're on, and right now we're on YouTube, probably we're streaming across a lot of platforms. But anyway, all of these platforms, they are private institutions, right? So they actually do have the right to set their own terms, and you can take it or leave it. You can decide that you like it or move on. Where I have the real problem is where the government steps in and pretty much they've been giving directions to these social media platforms, and under the implicit kind of threat that if you don't do this, you're going to have us to answer to. And these platforms, they don't want to deal with that kind of mess, so they kind of acquiesce to the demands by the powerful government people and agencies to carry their water for them. Now, I don't know whether they were crying that much about it, because these platforms out of Silicon Valley, these are all leftist people primarily.
Anyway.
So when Elon Musk came in, that really was an earthquake in the culture, of Twitter. And but they are still very left-leaning organizations. But still, I am a capitalist, so there are people out there who will give you an alternative platforms to use, and you can decide which platforms are more freedom of speech friendly than others, and make your choice accordingly, right? Let's just hope that the government doesn't shut down those actual freedom of speech corporations. That's my concern. So
there's the competition to Twitter, the Facebook Threads came out just a week or so ago, and it had 30 million downloads in the first week or something like that. But it's gone, deathly quiet. I can't see much about it in the media. Did you have a look at that at all?
No, I've heard about it here and there, but I never really figured that one out. What is Threads? So is it like a Twitter wannabe?
Well, that's the whole point, right? That's kind of the reason that I'm asking you that question is, what is Threads? Is it a competition to Twitter? Like, why would you want to? Why would you want to compete with Twitter? Well, that's what it is, right? So, but why would you want to compete with Twitter when Elon came in and said, you can say whatever you want over here, just don't be a dickhead, and you can do whatever you want, and we're just going to kind of shuffle things around and make it a little bit different, but it'll be the same type of experience, and I'll bring all the people back, and you know how the story goes. But then you look at Mark Zuckerberg and you think, why on earth? This is my perspective. This is the unspoken truth when I look at these tech billionaires, and I look at Mark Zuckerberg and thought to myself, I would never ever buy anything from that guy, ever. And I would never ever do anything that guy tells me to do or recommends, or I would look at the products or services he got, no matter how good they are. And the reason I wouldn't do that is because of the censorship that he imposed upon us during COVID. And he came out on Lex Fridman's podcast a couple of months back, and he was saying, censorship is just like, well, we don't know what's true or not. Do you censor somebody for saying the wrong thing, but they're not harming anybody? Or did you censor somebody for lying, or that's an untruth, or it's mis or dis? How do you know what it is? He even said himself he couldn't really define what it was. And but I look at that and I think people were shut down left, right, and center on Facebook and on Instagram for actually speaking the truth. And they were shut down because the narrative was not suiting them. And for the very reason that you said, is that the narrative is perpetuated by the government, not by those platforms. And if he's being co-opted by the government, when you look at a public-private partnership, that actually equals fascism.
Yep.
So you have a fascist government in charge, and you have a so-called commissar. If we go to China, any business in China has a card-carrying member of the Chinese Communist Party that sits in that company that says that the behavior of this company needs to actually benefit the Chinese Communist Party first, and then you might be able to do that yourself. Remember in the movie, Ed, The Hunt for Red October? Mm-hmm. And they had the commissar that was in there, and his name was Vasily. And Vasily went into the captain's cabin, and the captain strangled him and broke his neck or something, and he come out, and they were like, where's Vasily? And well, Vasily slipped on his tea. Mm-hmm. Vasily didn't slip on his tea, you idiot. You got rid of the commissar because he was the one stopping you from launching the nuclear weapons. Or he was the one that was going to tell you to launch the nuclear weapons. That's the extreme case of it, right? That's like taking it all the way to its nth degree. But these public-private partnerships that we have in media nowadays, in mainstream media and CNN, MSNBC, Facebook, and any other platform that is out there is co-opted by the government. It's a form of fascism. But nobody ever says that because you think fascism and you think black and white movies in Germany and people marching around goose stepping like a bunch of dickheads. But that's not actually the case. The definition of fascism is that public-private partnership.
Well, I'm going to be doing a video presentation in the next day or two on media collusion, which is on that topic. So stay tuned to that, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing you should look at if you're going to make that video is go and look back at some of the Jack Dorsey content. So Jack Dorsey is the original owner of Twitter, right? Go back and look at the recent content of him when the Twitter files are coming out, right? So Matt Taibbi and Schellenberger and everything doing their investigation, and Elon handing over all the Twitter files, and it's these revelations coming out that, yeah, the government had a backdoor directly to Twitter. And we've seen that here in Australia as well. The Department of Home Affairs talking directly to these companies saying, get rid of that post, that's lie, that's missed him, and all of this bullshit, right?
Again, I've gone back and forth about whether or not to do that report because I don't want to risk grabbing that electric wire.
Yeah, do it like this. Go and see the interviews of Jack Dorsey, because he was the one that was in charge when all that was going on with Twitter, right? And watch his body language. Because his body language is like it's like he's been found out or he's been busted, but it's almost like he didn't want to do it either. I kind of get that he seems like a pretty good dude. He seems like a good guy. Like he's trying to do the right thing.
No, he's not.
But he can't. It's like I'm trying to do the right, and he seems really conflicted to me. Whenever I see an interview with Jack Dorsey, I'm like, yeah, you're just the CIA agent. This whole Twitter thing was a giant psyop. I think maybe the whole thing was set up and funded by the CIA and the hedge funds in Silicon Valley there that are owned by them.
Okay, so it was nice while it lasted.
Everyone's worried about a central bank digital currency, but you log in with like Google Chrome and you're logged into your browser right now because you want your bookmarks to be synced with your phone and your iPad and the desktop browser that you're on. We already have CBDCs. We already have this stuff, man.
Another segment that I plan on doing is on
if you're still alive to actually do it.
is on Bitcoin.
Yep.
Listen, I don't buy this Satoshi Nakamoto guy.
Do you buy the CIA psyop that they created?
Well, listen. So you have a very sophisticated, cutting edge technology that was put out once, and it's never had to be redone. The algorithm has never had to be retouched. And
it works perfectly,
and it works. That never in the IT world. I know enough to know that never happens.
I was planning yesterday, building out a new website, a new business and stuff, and in the planning phase and saying, yeah, the site will be finished by the end of the weekend and we'll do the quality assurance testing for a week. We'll bring in some people, and we're going to have a list of bugs. We're going to have a list of 20 things that we need to cover off on. And, by Sunday next week, we'll be completely finished with that. I'm putting the timelines together, right? It's a pretty short project. It's easy to put together and stuff. But, yeah, man, inevitably, we're going to have 20 bugs and we'll fix 16 of them and 4 of them we're going to have to live with. That's just how it rolls. But how did they put out a perfectly refined system? It was perfect, and it's still perfect today. It's like such an eloquent solution. It's amazing.
Yeah, because we had that one guy who was really, really smart.
What a load of shit, eh?
Somewhere in the world. A load of shit. Yeah, and that guy, that initial Satoshi guy, he never sold any of his Bitcoin.
Yeah, he kept it all. Like, what? Come on. When you look at Ethereum like that, and you look at what's his name, Vitalik, you look at the people behind Ethereum, there's teams and teams of people. There's like hundreds of people working on this thing, and it's open source and you can tidy it up and you can fix this, you can make that, you can build on top of it. There's all sorts of things you can do. Bitcoin, none of that. So you think of just the scale of Ethereum and how many people are part of that, then you think of Bitcoin and you go, one dude? Really? Come on, man. Come on.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Not buying it.
Not buying it.
Right. Let's get into today's show. It's fun to do a live. We haven't kind of freestyled like that for a little while, so that's fun to do it with you. Ladies and gentlemen, on today's show, we're going to be talking about the dollar. Ed's got a little report on why the dollar is tanking. What does that mean to the economy? But more importantly, what does that mean to you? And what can you do about that? We've also got a little bit of a discussion on the voice to Parliament here in Australia. I'll show you a quick video of the Australian Prime Minister And you'll quickly see why he's very, very unpopular when it comes to this. He's like the single most arrogant and, in my view, most incompetent prime minister that we've ever had. And the reason that I say that, let me qualify that for a sec, because anything could be better than Scott Morrison, because I thought he was an arrogant dude. He was like a really unpopular dude, not a nice person, right? You know, whenever I've met politicians in my life, I've always found them to be like really warm and charismatic people, irrespective of their policies or what they stand for. I always found them to be really nice people. And the reason for that, you have to be a nice person if you're in public office, because you're always meeting people. You're always shaking hands with people, and people have got things that they want to discuss with you. They want to chat to you. They want to say hi to you. They want to take a picture with you. You have to be a nice person to actually be able to do that. And I think that our current Prime Minister, Albo, he seems like a nice dude. You know, I'm sure if I sat down with him for a cup of coffee or had lunch with him or something like that, he'd be a nice guy. Just a normal person, right? But he seems really, really arrogant when it comes to this voice to Parliament. And when he's trying to get his own way, the arrogance and the hubris of his behavior is really, really bad. And it goes to the very heart of optics. I was listening to the Patrick Bet-David podcast yesterday, and he was talking about the different candidates. And there's 5 or 6, I think it's 5 of them, 4 or 5 of them sitting around on a podcast talking about these political candidates. And they're talking about like their sports teams. And, you know, what about Chris Christie, and what about Mike Pence, and what about this guy, and what about that guy? And the way they're talking about it is as if they're, you know, NFL players or some shit like that. It was really quite strange. And we just don't do something like that here in Australia, because we have very limited choices and they're all bad. And Australians, as a rule of thumb, hate politicians and they hate politics. You know, if you go to a cricket, ScoMo used to go to the local Sharks game down here because he lived in the Shire, right? He'd go down to the local football team and claim he was a Sharks fan. He'd go and sit in the ground with a meat pie and a beer and something, like, you know, like everybody else there, and everyone would just boo him consistently. Like, you know, that's the Australian tradition. If you see a politician out in public, you're like, boo the guy, you know, like he's a moron. But I got a video for you that'll show you just how arrogant Albo actually is. And my view is that he's just not very statesman-like. He's very led by his minders. And I kind of get that he's unable to speak for himself without referring to like 3 minders. Like, what do I have to say? And you see him in a press conference from time to time. Someone asks him a question and he'll just go, and he'll move out of the way and put somebody else in there to answer the question. But real leadership, in my view, is not that. Real leadership is you being able to handle anything that anybody throws at you.
Well, actually, Joe Biden can take a lesson from Albo on that one.
Step out of the way and let somebody else, let the expert say it, you know?
Yeah, heck with someone before you talk, yeah.
Hey, Albo, what are interest rates? I don't know. Let me get the treasurer here. Hey, Jim, what are the interest rates? And it kind of makes sense what he's doing. Yeah. Like, you know, I'm the Prime Minister. He's the treasurer. Talk to him about finance things. Yeah. I kind of get what he's doing. But the way that he does it is just seems to be so arrogant. And I think I got a video that kind of sums all of that up as well. But politicians are used to being in arguments. They're used to fighting back, and they're used to somebody coming after them, and they bite back. And he bites back a little bit in this interview, and you'll see it. So I've got that for you here today. We'll have a bit of a laugh with that, and I'll show you how this voice to Parliament is failing, and it's coming undone quick smart. So let me hand over to you a little bit here, Ed. And do you want to set us up here for your little report?
I thought it'd be very important, since, you know, we talk a lot about a few key subjects here. We keep bringing up CBDCs and interest rates and the economy and things like that. And I've talked about the dollar quite a bit, and how the dollar is in serious trouble. I mean, one of our mantras is, you know, get your money out of your bank. You know, well, so since we talk about, you know, dollars quite a bit, I thought, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't do a report on what is going on specifically with the dollar over the past few weeks. So that's what my report is about.
All right, good call. Let's take a look, shall we?
Dollar is dropping sharply. Why is it dropping, and why does it matter? Okay, so let's start with a performance review of the US dollar. Let's take a look at a couple of charts. So what we'll do is we'll start with a long-term view, and then we'll narrow it down. Okay, so this is a 10-year chart on the US dollar. You can see what it's done over the past 10 years. You can see that along the way, it has had massive moves up, right? Okay, so this entire move right here, the last big monster one, this is when we had that fake 2-year sugar high rally based on based on artificially low federal funds rate and a huge liberal QE policy. So it had a solid 2 years there of a massive run up, and this can overlay with the stock market, right? So at the moment, it is at a very important support and resistance level, right? Anyway, so this is a very important congestion level on a long-term basis. All right, let's take a little closer look. All right, this is the 1 year chart, and you can see that the high was put in back in September of 2022, and then this is where we are today in July. All sorts of negative patterns in here that I can point out to you, but let's move on. Okay, and of course, here we go. What is this? I think it's a 3-month chart. And you can see over the past few weeks, the dollar has just been going straight south. Okay, so I think that I've established that the dollar is going down. It's selling off. It's dropping. It's puking. It's tanking. It's not looking very good. Okay, so why is this happening? Well, there's always a number of factors that go into these kind of things, right? But I think it's safe to say that the real reason is that the dollar is becoming less attractive as a global currency. And that is largely due to the fiscal and financial policies that we have adopted here in America over the past couple of years. And it also has a lot to do with the upcoming BRICS meeting in August. Remember, in August, the BRICS Alliance are going to get together and they're going to discuss this new currency that they want to issue as a competitor to the US dollar. And the assumption is that that new currency will be backed by a solid asset, probably gold. Even without that BRICS currency, a lot of countries around the world are starting to use the US dollar less and less as a reserve currency. They're starting to realize that they do have options and they do not have to be under the thumb of America all the time. Okay, so that's why. So now, why does it matter? Okay, there are all sorts of consequences to this. One of them is the value of gold has been going up. So remember, the mantra is, number one, reduce your exposure to your bank. Get your dollars out of the damn bank. 2, put a bunch of that money into gold and silver. This will get you out of the system and it'll get you outside of the US dollar. And 3, establish streams of passive recurring income. Now, as I'm recording this, the stock market is actually breaking out a little bit. It's had a little bit of a bullish breakout. Well, you kind of have to understand the weird way that Wall Street works. And that's a longer topic than I want to have for this video. And for now, just realize that the US dollar is declining and it probably has a lot further to go to the downside. If you'd like to know how to acquire some gold and silver, reach out to me. I'll have my email in the description below. Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, signing out.
What chart are you looking at there, Ed? Is that the USD index? Is that what that was?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Why do you look at that chart to measure the USD?
Well, because I don't have time to sit here and go. I had to pick and choose, right? You know, and that's the most popular.
Oh, that's the best way to actually do that.
No, you're right, because in the foreign exchange market, well, you have the dollar versus the lira. Dollar.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering why you chose that one.
Yeah. But it is just true that the dollar has been in decline, and there are. It's not as simple as, you know, 1 or 2 things affected. You know, it never is in the financial industry. You have to learn to look at a lot of different things and then kind of sit back, go for a long walk, clear your head, and just kind of figure out, well, in aggregate, what is this telling me? You know, so the human brain is a wonderful thing. You can take a lot of information, process it, and then they come up with conclusions. But this is one of the reasons why in the financial world, there's plenty of room for debate. You know, there's plenty of room for interpretation on different items. So just because I have an interpretation on any particular financial issue doesn't mean I have the only answer. That, you know, I'm giving you my perspective. But what I try to do is I always try to boil things down to brass tacks. All right, so what does it mean? Let's try to take as much of the noise out of it as possible. And in these, I mean, look, unless you are really interested in that kind of, you know, intellectual banter, intellectual gymnastics, or unless you're really interested in getting your PhD in economics, most people just want to know, all right, so why should I care? How does it affect me? So that's what we try to zero in on, right? How does this affect us? And so,
what is the impact to day-to-day activity if the US dollar continues to decline and the value of it continues to decline versus other currencies?
Okay, now this is one of the weird things about Wall Street, right? We're it's kind of a bizarre world sometimes, but there's logic to it when you think through it. Now Wall Street is kind of popping out. The stock market has been popping up over the past. It's broken out of a very impressive pattern, which is short term bullish. Well, why would that be if the dollar is being clobbered? Okay, well, as the value of the dollar goes down, the profits of overseas corporations, a lot of the corporations who make the money overseas, they'll make more money. They make more profits as the value of the dollar goes down. You know what I mean? I don't want to go into it here, but just for now, just trust me. That's the way it is. So Wall Street, in a perverted sort of way, is seeing the weakness of the dollar as a good thing for the U.S. companies in terms of profits. Remember, Wall Street is a discounting mechanism, right? It's always looking 6 months down the road, kind of like a hockey player. They don't go to where the hockey puck is; they go to where it's going to be. That's what Wall Street is always trying to do. They're always trying to anticipate what is going to come. But there are all sorts of crosswinds in the industry, but for us, it means if you have money sitting in your bank, the value of your dollars are going down. So
it's getting chewed up. It's getting chewed up by inflation, and it's getting chewed up by that value coming down. But the value of it's only coming down if you're comparing it to something else. So if I've got that money sitting in the bank account, but I'm not using it to buy goods and services overseas as compared to the euro or the pound or the yen or something like that, then the value of that external factor of the value of it coming down shouldn't affect me too much, should it? But if I'm buying products that are coming from over those places, those products are more expensive then.
You're right. Exactly. Well, this is the way I look at it. I look at it as the dollar's role in the world, the role it plays, and the way I personally see it is I see it as the dollar losing its prestige, it's losing its dominant status on the world stage, and the implication beyond that is much more inflation, because as other countries stop using our currencies as reserve currencies and to conduct international trade, they're going to be sending those dollars back to us, which is going to create inflation. So the more clout that the U.S. dollar has overseas, the
better it is for you at home.
Well, but the more inflation we're going to see here.
Because, I see the other way around. Yes,
right,
yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
yeah.
So tell me then, what is the prophecy, or maybe the hypothesis? Not the high prophecy, because you kind of unzipping your fly and putting it on the chopping block when you do that, right? But what is the hypothesis if the BRICS countries announce the currencies that are backed by gold? I think that they're still going to use their own currencies, but the currency is backed by gold, and in those transactions, when they go between each other, that's how they do it. But then my question is, how do they actually transact with the rest of the world that are not part of that BRICS coalition?
Well, that's just it, right? The devil's in the details. We have to, right now, everyone's speculating about how this new currency is going to look. Now, we use that phrase, this new currency, just out of convenience. It's easier. The truth of the matter is, there probably is not going to be a currency. They're all going to use their own specific currencies.
But it's just backed by gold, so that way they can transact with each other directly. I can use Chinese yuan to buy something in Russia, and they can use rubles to buy something off China. They don't have to change their currency. A Russian guy doesn't have to change his rubles to yuan to buy something in China, and vice versa.
Right. So the way I'm guessing it will kind of work is that each country will have, let's take Brazil for the Brazilian real. Okay. So they're going to have one for the common folk and one for international trade. And the one for international trade will be backed by gold. So it's not like a Brazilian could go into the bank and cash in his real for gold. It's just there for purposes of international trade. So I'm curious to see how it'll work out. We might end up with two different bid and ask prices for each currency.
That's where I was gonna go next. Like when you I think of when I've traded Forex before, and you just look at the sheer volume of what goes on in the Forex market on a daily basis. I used to trade indexes, right? So just trade the Aussie 200 and just stick to that. And what are the things that affect that? Is a really good thing about Australia is when I wake up in the morning to go trading, the American market is closing. So if I got up early in the morning at like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning and look at the American markets, what had happened, I could usually see indicators pointing in the day trading scenario that we were about to follow that as we opened. And I'd let the market open, and sometimes, there'd be a crash overnight, and I'd just get myself short. But I would put my entry like well away from where the current price is, because when the market's closed, it's just kind of ranging about half a point, little. So I'll put my entry here and a short sale down here, and then make sure I'd grab the coattails of it as on the way down. But when I think of foreign exchange, because I was like, maybe I should learn to trade some Forex and do that as well, because I can do this index thing pretty good because it's only one thing. But then you look at all the, if I'm going to trade USD Euro, and I'm like, look at the volume on this. Like what? It's like astronomical compared to the index or compared to a stock by itself. It's just incredible. But then then all of a sudden we've got a bank for international settlements that's backed by gold, and BRICS are doing that. Then you've got just regular markets like that. I think there's opportunity there. So this new currency, this new basket of currencies, this new way of doing things, that creates huge opportunity. And I believe that that's actually one of the reasons you should focus on that, because don't think just because it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, don't think that that's a bad thing. This could be a really good thing for opportunity, man. Grab the coattails of it. Could be amazing.
No, I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's great.
But Ed, you should be a patriot. You should be. Hey, listen, our people have mismanaged our finances so badly. At some point, F you, man. I'm a capitalist. At heart. So,
and the free market will determine, based on, I knew you were going to say that, right? And the free market will determine which is the best version of it. Is it the dollar, or is it the BRICS gold-based currencies, or is it something else completely? Is it a central bank digital currency? The free market will help us to decide those things.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, maybe this kind of competition, the first time the dollar has had any real competition, maybe it'll force them to get their acts together. So that's what capitalism does, right? If for competition, gives us better products, because customers can go wherever they're going to get the best product. But in this upcoming August meeting for the BRICS nations, I'd be very surprised if they actually announce, the gold back setup the way it is. I think what they're going to do, they'll probably make announcements that's going to show progress toward it, and they'll kind of like clarify. They'll give us some clarity on what the picture is going to look like, what the final product is going to look like. But this is a complicated scenario, right? You have multiple countries joining. It's going to be kind of a there's going to be a lot of diplomacy needed behind this product, whatever it is. So I'd be kind of surprised if they're able to hammer it out this quickly. But you never know. But either way, though, it is coming quickly. Historically speaking, this is coming on very rapidly. And the market doesn't actually need the actual product to be up and running. They just need to have confidence that the product is going to be there, right? So, that's why the Fed many times doesn't have to lower or raise rates. They talk about lowering. They jawbone it, right? Yeah. They say, "Oh, we think so." So many times the Federal Reserve and companies do the same thing, right? They will use words to meet their objectives without having to lift a finger. So you do have to kind of learn the lingo on Wall Street. But for now, I just want everyone to be aware of what is going on with the dollar, because this sell-off we've had over the past few weeks, that was a precipitous sell-off. Okay, it's one thing to see a trend kind of going, but when you see a nasty sell-off like the one that I just showed in the chart, that's
unusual.
Amazing. Yeah. So when you see stuff like that, you do want to pay attention, because you don't know whether it's the beginning of a much bigger deal, or whether it'll have a bounce and continue the sell. So I just want to make people aware, and stay tuned to the channel here. Stay tuned to Unspoken Truth. If anything really dramatic happens, we will be screaming about it here. So make sure you have subscribed if you haven't subscribed already.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a nice way to round it out. I want to just add one final thing there, if I may, Ed. The way that you described it is, in trading terms, it's a leading indicator, right? So when we're looking at the chart and we see this consistent lower lows, and it opens lower than the previous low, and we see the chart moving in a southerly direction down towards the bottom of your page or the bottom of your screen, then that could be a leading indicator for something, but it could also be nothing. it might also hit some support there and just simply bounce back off that. Or if it pushes through that most recent support, then it continues on its path in a southerly direction like that. That's why you've got to pay a little bit of attention to the news. That's why you've got to pay a little bit of attention to these things, because you hear these things and I go, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant might blow up. What? Is that the black swan event of 2023? And, is the dollar crashing? What, the dollar's crashing? Really? Well, maybe it could be. That could be the leading indicator. And I think that's why you've really got to plug into news sources, and you've got to plug into the things that matter to you, because you need those leading indicators so you don't wake up one morning and go, oh my God, they fired a nuclear weapon and they blew up the power plant. Or, oh my God, the US dollar collapsed completely and, Russia brought out a new currency backed by God. If you're not ready for those things, that can be a problem in your life.
Plug into the unspoken truth.
There it is, baby. There it is. All right, Ed, good job on the report as usual, mate. Well done. Let me shift gears here for us folks into the voice to Parliament. And I just want to share with people exactly how the political system works here in Australia. It seems very, very complicated the way this is straight from the Australian Electoral Commission website. And apparently we have the best electoral commission in the world. And it's been stated many times that the way that we run elections here in Australia, because voting is compulsory, and the way that actually happens, you show your ID. I don't know. How does it happen for you? Tell me about the process of voting in America and I'll compare it for you.
Well, we're not communists like you there. So
you don't have to vote. That's the process.
Yeah, that's it. Look, people should not be compelled to vote. That's tyranny.
Well, then there'd be no people that voted, because everyone thinks the politicians are dickheads, and there'd be like 10 people that turned up that only vote for themselves.
Listen, choosing not to vote is a vote itself.
So tell me about the process when you do choose to vote.
Well, we have a two-party system, which makes much more sense to me than a system that has 30, 40 parties like you and UK.
That's confusing, man. The ballot paper is like that's
a
meter long.
When you have too many parties, then you can have a minority party that actually wins, right? Mm-hmm. All you need is 1% more than some other guy, and
they form coalitions, right?
So it can be really a big mess. You have no real way of getting I don't know a cohesive message across. I don't know how you guys do that without shooting yourself in the head. Well, you can't shoot yourself. They took away your guns. But no, drive me crazy. So we have a two-party system here, and it's a state-by-state deal, right? Every state has their own way of doing things. Some people have caucuses. Some people have what do they call it? Primaries. So every state can decide how it looks, but then they put it on the national ballot, and then we have what's called the Electoral College, which is very important. Remember, America, we use the term democracy a lot. But that's just a philosophy. We are not a democracy.
We are.
They're very good. We are a republic. We pledge allegiance to the republic. To the republic, for which it stands. So we vote for the Electoral College. And then
so when you go in to actually vote, you go into a voting booth. Are you voting for a candidate, or are you voting for a political party?
No,
on a piece of paper.
Again, state by state, right? Some states still use paper, and some have electronic thing, and that's a whole big debate all by itself. Here, that's a whole big controversy.
But you don't have to show ID when you vote, do you?
Well, that's another big controversy. Yes, you do.
You do.
Again, it's a state by state thing, right? So some states don't allow it, and this is where now you should, in my opinion, you should have to provide ID. Otherwise, anybody from anywhere in the world could go in and vote who aren't citizens. And that is what the Democrats want. They want that. They want anybody from any country to be able to vote in our system. No ID required. And there have been scandals of votes being attributed to people who are dead. So there is an awful lot of room for scandals and for
and you have chaos with your mail-in votes, don't you?
Yep. Boy, I didn't know how far down this rabbit hole you want to get, but yeah, we have we have. So the last few election cycles, we've had this new kind of fad and it's called vote harvesting. I've heard of that, where people will go around and they'll collect everybody's, like here in the Minneapolis area. we have a large Somali, community,
Yep.
and they got together, and they pretty much all live in the same district inside of Minneapolis, and that's how Ilhan Omar got elected. Right? And so they would have these Somalis. They'd pick a leader, and you go around and knock on the doors of all of these high-rise units, these slum units, and knock on the door and instruct people how to fill out their ballot for it. And so they would collect the ballots, and then they would drive it to the. And I'm sure along the way they're making sure that they voted the right way. Right. And then they so you have these people going around, and of course their argument is, well, there are people who can't get to they're elderly and they can't get there. So we're providing a public service to make sure that everyone's vote counts.
But how do I know that that's a legit vote? How do I know that, I just don't take those pieces of paper into a room and have 20 people there and they all fill in 2,000 of them each? How do I know?
That's it. You don't. That's why this
that's the harvesting that you're talking
about. Right.
About.
That's this harvesting that we're talking about. And of course, the Democrats love it because this is how Democrats win. And most Republicans, good Republicans, are, against it. So that's a real issue because.
So let me go near the electric fence here on that point. How did Joe Biden get 81 million more votes than Barack Obama?
Yeah, more than Barack Obama.
But he didn't campaign.
Everyone secretly suspected that Joe was smarter than Barack all the while. So, and he's much more charming, much more well-spoken than Barack. So you kind of you can buy it, right? No, exactly. Well, again, that conspiracy, right? Well, this, we will never know because these bad actors are protected. Look, listen, we are in a rigged system. We're in a rigged system.
And that's what I wanted to show, right, is that I'm not saying that it's rigged or it's corrupt or something like that, but I think everybody would agree that it's rigged and it's corrupt. Or if you're a bit of a Boy Scout, as you always call me, right, there's potential for that to actually happen. So let me contrast that for you here in Australia. We have the Australian Electoral Commission and we have a uniform policy around everything that we do. Right, so if you're going to do a postal vote or you're going to vote early, you still have to present your ID. So that there's no fraud, right? And everybody has to vote. And if you don't vote, you get fined. But you can get out of those fines as well. You say, like, I don't want to vote. I believe it's my democratic right not to vote, and I'll leave you alone, right? But if you don't fight back against that or push back against that somehow, that fine will stick. So a referendum in Australia is quite different to the voting policy. So when we vote in Australia, you turn up to the local school and you walk in and there's people standing out the front with how to vote cards. You want to vote for One Nation? Here's how to vote for them. You want to vote for the Liberals or for Labor or for the Greens? Here's how you vote for them. And they hand out the how to vote cards and you look at it because the form is like a meter long. And then you get another one for the Senate that's only like a B5 piece of paper. It's like small. There's only like 6 boxes on it. You pick one like that and you put them in order and stuff. So it's very simple in one sense, but very convoluted in the other sense. You can vote above the line or you can vote below the line. Mm-hmm. And if you vote above the line, you've got to put a number in all the boxes, and there's like 30 boxes with the 30 parties, or just pick one below the line. And then I always like to scratch my head and go, imagine being the person that counts that, and you've got to like pull them out and you've got to like, where's the number one? So it goes in that pile there. That's what, and then we have a preference system and stuff. Anyway, all of that boring stuff aside, we have a uniform system across all states and territories here in Australia. But the constitutional change, which is a referendum, which is what we've got here, is what I got on the screen here. A majority of more than half of voters around Australia have to say yes. But if you have more than half voters say yes to whatever the question is on the referendum in New South Wales, that doesn't mean the thing gets up because we're the most populous state. You have to have 4 states say yes in order for it to actually work and to go ahead. And this is because it's constitutional change that we're trying to do. And the Constitution here in Australia is the rule book about how Parliament is governed. And the reason that this is kicking up such a stink here in Australia is because if you change the Constitution and now we have an elected body or an unelected body of people trying to change the way that the laws work here in Australia, it's said, the constitutional lawyers are saying, that it might end up in the High Court. So every time a piece of legislation is passed by government or presented to government for the voice to Parliament to comment on, they might take it to the High Court to challenge it because it's in the Constitution and they're in the Constitution. So I think they've made a fundamental mistake with the voice to Parliament. And as I look at it, I was talking to Susie about this the other day, and I was listening to all these yes campaigners. And I was listening to what they're saying and going, yeah, it's a good idea. I really like that. I found myself being swayed to their side of it. And I thought to myself, imagine if the government came out and said, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new thing called the voice to parliament. We're going to legislate it, and we're going to put 30 people, 27 people, however many people it is, in a position to comment on every single thing to do with Indigenous affairs. I don't think there'd be a single person in Australia that'd go, oh, well, that's a terrible idea. Don't you do that already? Haven't you done that already? But the reason that they don't want to legislate it, and the reason the Prime Minister says that, oh, the reason I'm not going to do that is because that's not what Indigenous people have asked for. They've asked for constitutional change. So the voice to Parliament is two things. It's recognition of Indigenous Australians in the Constitution, and then that they have a voice to Parliament. And there wouldn't be very many people in Australia that would say no to Indigenous recognition in the Constitution. Well, they're First Nations people. Yeah, why not? Of course. But then you want to have the voice to Parliament as well. It's like a bridge too far for everybody. But if they legislate it, and the reason they don't want to legislate it is apparently that's not what they asked for. They want constitutional change, so it's permanent. But that's not how democracy works. If legislation was in place and that body was appointed to try and do things better, I agree that that's a really good thing. And I would support that. I'd say yes to that. So I would vote yes to your constitutional recognition and yes to your legislative changes. Yes, good. Because if it didn't work, another government could come in and go, you know what, it's not working. You guys are a bunch of scammers. Get the hell out of here. And they can get rid of it and amend the legislation. That's how democracy works, where politicians create laws and rules and act on behalf of the will of the people. We shouldn't be we shouldn't be on the receiving end of 27 unelected people that make the rules for everybody else. It just doesn't make any sense. And when I think about it in that context, it's like the Labor Party and Albo just kind of overreached ever so slightly. And I think if he pulled back a little bit and said, look, let's take the voice out, we'll just legislate that because we can do that anyway, and we'll just give you the recognition. Everyone would go, sweet, he'd have a majority, he'd have his legacy, we would be moving towards a better world. But that's not what he's doing. And this Prime Minister is so arrogant, he's digging his heels in. So there's some statistics that came out about support for the voice to Parliament from February to now, and there's 3 different polls. I'll quote the numbers. People were saying yes, 56% of them saying yes, now only 41% saying yes. 60% in another poll were saying yes, now 49% saying yes. 65% to 47%. And there was a News Corp poll that came out just about a week ago, and the division is 41% of people saying yes, 48% of people saying no, 11% on the fence. 11% on the fence because they don't want to say no because they don't want to be seen as racist. Doesn't make any sense. So they've also said, and this came out earlier in the campaign, that if the voice to Parliament fails, we're just going to legislate it. Well, why don't you just legislate it and then just give them recognition? And stop with all the chaos. You're creating all this chaos in society. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link down below to the interview that I'm going to show you here with Ben Fordham, a Prime Minister. And I want you to have a listen to that. And you'll hear Albo himself talking about cost of living, about interest rates, and about the voice to Parliament. And it gets pretty testy. And there was just a day or so ago, we have the Indigenous Affairs Minister, Linda Burney, on the left there. She was challenged by the Shadow Minister, Jacinta Price, and they're both Aboriginal women. So Linda is saying, yes, we want this. She's worked in government for however many years. Apparently, she's presided over $480 billion that have gone to Indigenous affairs.
Whoa.
But we still can't get it right. And we have this thing in Australia called closing the gap. And there's 19 points that they want to close the gap on in relation to Indigenous affairs. And only 4 of them have got up. And only 4 of them have got up under her watch, under her being responsible for all of these things, in and out of government, in and out of different positions, in bureaucracy and whatnot. And Jacinta Price has come out and said, let's have a debate. And you know what she said?
No. Yeah.
No, we're not debating that. We'll leave it to the Australian government to debate it.
So
the two lead people from yes side and no side. So the no side saying, will you get up on stage and debate me and tell Australians why we should vote? And then I'll tell Australians why we should vote no. You tell them why we should vote yes. Let's put it in the public forum. Isn't that how debates are supposed to be carried out in Australia? It's not happening. And it just shows me the arrogance and hubris of the Australian Labor Party. They're not for the people at all. They're for the elites. It's just bullshit.
Well, yeah, it's just they don't really believe in their product because they know they can't defend it.
Well, it seems like just such a strange conversation to be having. Like, why would you not want to debate it? Like, why
Well,
would you go away from something like that?
it's for the
Really
same
weird.
reason. It's for the same reason that no Democrat politician will debate Robert F. Kennedy because they know he will eat their lunch.
I think Jacinta Price will do the same thing as well, right? And Jacinta Price is married to an Irish guy. So she's an Indigenous woman from Alice Springs and grew up in that part of the world. I think she worked in local council and then became a member and then in the Liberal Party. And she's seen this ascension through the ranks, right? Reminds me a little bit of Tulsi Gabbard. That's what it reminds me of. And, why would you not put an Indigenous person into an Indigenous portfolio? What better person could be there? And the Labor Party have done it with Linda Burney, and the Liberal Party have done it with Jacinta Price. And there was a lot of arguing back and forth earlier in the year saying that she's too inexperienced to actually be in that portfolio to be able to do that. And it's like, well, hang on a second. She's the exact person to be in that portfolio because she worked in council. She understands the local affairs at the grassroots level, and she understands all of those things. And she's willing to put herself forward and speak out and speak her mind. And why would you want somebody that's a shrinking violet into that position? So I look at her ascension through Australian politics, very similar to Tulsi Gabbard's ascension. She worked in local government, then she became the member, and she's in the military and all these things. It's very, very similar in that sense. And when you hear Jacinta speak, she's a completely normal Australian person. She has a little bit of charisma there, as all politicians do. She has some media training there, as all politicians do. But when she talks about this, she's like, the voice of parliament, I'm married to a white guy. You want to divide my family? Like, why do I get more rights than he does? And then my children are of mixed race. What happens there? You look at these things and you think she's somebody that's actually on the receiving end of all of this. Now, Linda Burney, I don't know her personal story or her personal background, but that's certainly not something that's been brought to the forefront. What I do know is she's been very successful in her bureaucracy and her career in politics. She's the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, for heaven's sake. So she's been successful and been a beneficiary of all the systems that are in place, but then is saying that the system in place is broken. But hang on a minute, you're the person that's in charge of the system that's in place, and you've been the direct beneficiary of it all. There's just so many contradictions throughout all of that. It's pretty ridiculous, man. I don't know, do you guys have divisive politics like this type of thing in American politics?
Not at all. We don't have any kind of controversy in our politics here. I don't know how.
Do you have deliberate divisiveness created by a politician? Like, why would you deliberately pick a fight with somebody? Like, what?
Oh no, that is the leftist playbook. Is
deliberately dividing.
That's right. That's right. That's how they win. This whole business about racism in America. This is a cooked up industry. It is an industry. All of these, Black Lives Matter.
That's what this feels like to me.
Yeah,
like that.
Right. So this it's a money making machine, and politically, it's a tool of division in America, and that's what politicians want. They want they want the people divided. The last thing a politician wants is a united country, because that's a threat to them. But when a country is divided, then they can start playing all sorts of cards. They can play the race card at this event, and they can play the poverty card at this event, and they can play. They want you dependent on the government for everything. They want you poor. They want you. They want you to feel victimized. They want a strong victimized class.
That's everything that you're describing from the yes side. That's how they describe Indigenous Australians, and there is a percentage of Indigenous Australians that fit squarely in all of those categories that you just described. But equally, there's an element of all of Australian society that fits squarely in that. People with mental health issues, drug problems, people with family problems, people with personal problems. Just because you're Indigenous, it doesn't mean that you suffer more. And that's the argument for the no case. You're lumping everybody into one category, but there is no one category, because you can't, even two individuals don't fit in one category. It's ridiculous.
And that's one of the ironies and hypocrisies of the Democratic Party, particularly. This is point to their voting ID issue. So Democrats, they do not believe in voter ID because they claim that it would handicap minorities. Well, how racist is that? You assume that a black person cannot figure out how to get a driver's license or how to get a state ID license or how to get any kind of ID. You're assuming because they're black, they're too stupid to get an ID.
Yeah, and there would be some stupid ones there, but there's some stupid other people as well. Asian people, white people, Indian people. The stupidity across all society.
So this argument that the particular people that they're somehow oppressed because of this policy, they got to think it through. You are insulting those people. So that's what I would do if I were a Republican, if I were running for office and I was on the other side of the issue. I'd point it out at every possible opportunity. You're a racist, man. You're a racist.
They have been doing that here on the No campaign, and they're simply saying that you're just lumping us all into one category, and that's not fair and not reasonable. All right, let's take a little look at Albo. And again, I just want to preface it here, folks, by saying the reason that I think Anthony Albanese is a terrible prime minister is he's just a very arrogant person. And when things don't go his way, he just digs his heels in, and he's actually quite mean and nasty about things. And there's just no need to be that way. I'm certain he's not like that in real life. I'm certain of it. Nobody is. Nobody is like that all the time. But
I am.
The nastiness really shows. Let's take a look at the video here. Here we go.
Okay.
Point, because I know where you're reading from. You're reading from the No pamphlet.
I'm not reading. Excuse me, Prime Minister.
Well, that's in the
I'm
No
not reading.
pamphlet.
Excuse me.
Well, that quote is in the No pamphlet.
Excuse me.
Well, it is.
I am not reading from the No pamphlet. I'm reading from my own questions that I have written.
No, that's fine. That quote is in the No pamphlet.
Let me finish. So that I don't misquote people like Megan Davis or Thomas Mayo. Thomas Mayo says the Voice will help to tear down institutions, pressure governments to pay the rent, pay reparations and compensation, and punish politicians who fail to deliver. So I'm keen to know, what does pay the rent mean?
Well, I disagree with that. But
are there going to be reparations?
No, Ben. I'll make this point.
Wouldn't it stand to reason? No, I'm on a flow
well,
here.
when you finish...
You've just accused me of reading from a pamphlet.
No, I didn't. So I said those quotes are from the No...
Let me just interject a little bit there. He starts out by saying, you're reading from the No pamphlet. You're doing that. Ben holds the thing up and goes, no, I'm not. They're my questions. What are you talking about? They're my questions. And no, you're reading from the No. No, they're my questions. And then Ben says, you just accused me of doing that, and he just lied. You just accused me from reading from the No pamphlet, and I'm telling you that I didn't. No, I didn't do that. Let me just back it up and watch what he says again. The Prime Minister just lied to the Australian public, and he's lying to Ben. And what he's doing is trying to tell a white lie to smooth it over so he can get his point across. Listen closely to how he lies to him.
I'm on a flow
well,
here.
when you finish...
You've just accused me of reading from a pamphlet.
No, I didn't. So I said those quotes are from the No pamphlet, which they are.
All right, I'll listen back to that. But anyway, let me just focus on the important thing. Surely, as part of the Uluru Statement, we have a voice, we have treaty, we have truth-telling. As part of a treaty, won't there be compensation? If there is, I mean... That's not totally unexpected.
This isn't about a treaty, Ben.
But there are three parts of the Uluru Statement.
Yeah, and this is not.
So you're talking about the Voice.
This is not about a treaty.
But as part of treaty, which we guess will be a following step.
This is not about a treaty.
Do you foresee that compensation would be paid?
This is not about a treaty. This isn't about that. Ben, what we need to do is to, and this is the issue here, we have had a debate about things that aren't happening rather than about things that are.
But and people want to know, will compensation be paid?
Can I make one point? No, Ben. I can't say it any clearer.
Okay.
Compensation has nothing to do with what people will vote on in the last quarter of this year.
No, I'm talking about after that.
That won't age well.
Well, they're not voting on any of that.
No, I was just saying there are three stages. So after we go through the Voice, is it natural to assume that as part of treaty...
No, it's not natural
so Thomas Mayo's
to go
wrong?
through all the hypotheticals. I'm talking about what is on the agenda this year,
The guy who wrote the book about the Voice, Thomas Mayo, says...
What, the book?
Well, the book.
Well, there's one book, is there?
Well, I'm sure there are other books.
There's lots of books and lots of individuals. Can I make this point, Ben? Can I make a point, please? Which is this. If people look at the Yes pamphlet that's out there on the website and the No pamphlet, the thing that struck me is that the Yes pamphlet is positive. It doesn't misquote anyone.
So I look at all of this and I wonder, like, why is he so arrogant? Why is he so testy? Why can't he just say it in a way that is meaningful and actually helpful to the conversation. He's just really testy about it. And it just shows me how arrogant he actually is.
Okay, well, I don't know this guy as much as you do, obviously. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. Anyone can have a bad day, right? Do you think he might have just been?
Yeah, but you can't have a bad prime ministership, man. It's been bad since you got out of the gate.
Okay, well, there you go. All right. So if this is par for the course, if this is his modus operandi, then I get it. I mean, if I were a presidential coach or a prime minister coach, and I'd have a little pep talk with them before. He might think about doing that. Hire a professional and have a little session every time you go on to remind yourself of a few key things. One thing you do is, like, look, he should have owned up that he made the mistake. Yeah, okay, I apologize. He should have said, I apologize for saying you took that out of the no pamphlet. I apologize. And then, after
it could have been as easy as that. Could have been as easy as saying they're the points from the no campaign. No, Prime Minister, they're not. Oh, no way. Are they the questions that you wrote? Oh, cool. Well, let's address them then. Let's have a look at them. Give me the first question. What have you got?
There you go. A little humility goes an awful long. Now, I don't know about Australians, but I know that Americans, I think people in general are actually pretty forgiving people. They kind of understand.
Yes, I agree.
And if you own up to things like that, just own it. And then, okay, I misheard or something, and just get on and move on. Another thing you want to do is you don't want to get, it's all about status alignment that you and I used to talk about a lot when we were coaching people on the product. Status alignment, right? You don't want to get in a pissing match with a radio show host, right?
No, you're not going to win. He's got the microphone, and you're going to leave, and he's still got the microphone.
So better. So instead of trying to talk over each other, which just irritates everyone. I don't care who it is. If it's someone that I back, but they're stepping over someone else's, I get annoyed. Just shut the fuck up. Let the guy have his piece, and then you say what you're going to say.
And that's my whole point. Is he's not? The arrogance of what he's saying is that no matter what you say, Ben, you are wrong and I am right. No matter what you say, I've got more information about this has happened, how this has happened, and the process, and what's going on, and what people want, and that is all true. All of it is true. Of course he has more information. He's the Prime Minister, for heaven's sake. He's got committees. There's hundreds of people working on this particular thing for him, but he's unable to articulate his message. And that's why I say he's incompetent. And that's why I say he's the most incompetent, unstatesman-like Prime Minister we've ever had. And I think what actually is really going on in Parliament here is I think people overthink it, and I think we're coached by Hollywood a little bit on how politicians behave. But what you forget is, I was watching a show yesterday, and the performance from the actor was just like absolutely first class. It is just I stopped it, rewound it, and watched it again. It was so unbelievably good, and I thought to myself, he's the emperor, and the emperor. That's how the emperor is. But he's sitting on the throne like in deep thought, and people come in, and he stands up, and and the look of him, and it's just so doctored. That's not what real people are like in real life. Real people can't speak like that. They're not like that. They can't deliver content like that. They're not as articulated as that. They can't speak like that. But if you know that in real life, but that's what we're used to watching on our screens because we love story and that's how people get entertained these days, then you see the politician like him, he's so clumsy and he's so, it's like, dude, just go get some, go on like half a dozen podcasts, man, and go and talk to some people in long format. And the people around him are just as bad as him because they're responsible for his poor delivery. Yeah. It's just the marketing people around him are just absolutely hopeless, man.
Well, I've always felt that there's power in brevity, right? If you can deliver, if you can deliver, and there's another thing you and I used to, when we were teaching people sales techniques, and we'd advise them, listen, you want to have an elevator pitch. You want to boil down. So whatever it is you want to say, take some time and boil it down to 2 or 3 paragraphs at the most. Matter of fact, it's better if you can get it down to 1 paragraph, maybe even 2 sentences. So, put some thought into it. Think about the points that you want to make and find a nice descriptive way of getting that across. And you say that over and over at every speech you give, every gathering, so it becomes part of the people. People take it in, right? That's what advertising is, right? Advertising, a ketchup commercial. They have a jingle, they have a tagline, and then after a while, you're repeating the tagline. Where's the beef, right? So brevity is very, very powerful, especially in politics, especially when your competition, they're all blabbermouths. Politicians love to talk, right? They love to hear. So if you can make your point in a pithy, concise, understandable way, you're going to stand out right there. But politicians, though, they just can't help themselves. They don't have the discipline to keep their messages short and pithy. And okay, so that's the one side. But on the other side, there's a part of me is always very wary of the guy who's slick and smooth and charming, and you know who I'm talking about. Right, that we had a person like that in office here for 8 years, and he did more damage to America than any other president, other than Joe
the worst
Biden.
in American history. Yeah.
Right, but people loved him because he was charming and he was smooth and he was eloquent. Okay, so I look then you got someone like Trump who's the complete opposite. The guy trips over his words, kind of like me, right? Trips over his words. He has a hard time making a coherent thought. Every once in a while, he comes across a gem, and then he repeats it over. And he knows when he has a gem, right?
He knows when he found one.
Yeah. And then he'll lay into it and he'll emphasize it. But that's one of his one of the things people found alluring about Trump was that he was a billionaire, but aside from that, he's kind of a regular guy. He talks like most people talk.
And he's eating McDonald's on his own private plane. You think he'd be eating lobster? He's not. Nah, give me a hamburger.
Right. So, so there's that side of the argument too, right? So, yeah. I mean, but in all cases, though, you got to find a way to relate to people. Find a way. You do have to be likable. And when you get into those kind of shouting matches with the guy on the radio, it doesn't do much to elevate your status as a statesman, like you said.
Yeah, it's when you listen to the full interview, and I'm only giving you a 2-minute soundbite of it. He, in his defense a little bit, he's actually pretty good, and he says some good things. He communicates his message effectively, and he handles the criticism quite well. And you would expect somebody that's been in politics for 30 years or whatever it is to be able to do that. But surprisingly, when it came to the real issues and the testy issues, he was quite sensitive to it all. It's kind of like that was his electric fence, and somebody's coming up against his electric fence, and he was zapping them and trying to get rid of this disinformation. That's misinformation. He's almost, it felt like it was on the verge of that. And politics by its very nature, I think, is a very grubby sport. And what we're seeing there is him immediately saying that all you're doing is being negative. You're saying the opposite of what I'm saying. And he closed out that little 2-minute thing by saying, if you compare what the no people are saying to what we're saying, they're saying all the negative things, we're saying all the positive things. This is a positive thing for Australia. Why don't we look at it? But you just I can't see the positives in it. And I think Australians are smart enough to recognize what it is that he's trying to do.
So how much of that do you think is virtue signaling, and how much of it do you think is sincere belief in?
I think 100% of it is sincere belief from his side. And the reason I say that is because he says, look, it's not Parliament saying it. It's not politicians saying it. We went and consulted with around Australia, with Indigenous people all around Australia, and this is what they said they wanted. So we act on behalf of the people. So we've brought that back to Parliament. It went through the Senate it sailed through the Senate without actually any issues about let's have a referendum. And now we're at the point at the referendum. Now we're going, well, maybe only that little slice of the population wanted it. So Indigenous people represent 3.7% of the Australian population, and they're only talking to maybe 1% of that 3% to actually come up with these ideas. And then there's 26 million other people here in Australia going, what? We're not doing that. What are you talking about?
I'm always very skeptical about those kind of polling. It all depends on how you ask the question, right?
And it's too narrow. It doesn't matter if you ask the questions properly or not. You're only asking, in the scheme of things, how many people did they really talk to in the scheme of things? Maybe 50,000 people that they got their message in front of. Because I'd never heard of it before, that when the government said that they were going to actually come to power and the Labor government won, we've been elected on this mandate. This is what we're going to do. Everyone's like, that's an election promise? Really? How many people did you really talk to actually make that happen? If you found out the real numbers, it would be pretty shocking. And I'm also careful of the statistics related to the polls for what you're talking about as well. I started out this little segment here, and I'll close out with this bit as well by saying 56% of people started off in one news poll saying that they would vote yes. And in that same news poll, a couple of months later, only 41% of people have said that. Yeah, but how many people did you ask? 10, 20, 1,000, 1,200? I think for a news poll to be legit, they have to ask 1,200 people. I can't remember. I read that somewhere once when I used to work in a marketing agency. But it's not very many people. You can't ask a cross-section of 1,000 people and say that that's reflective of the Australian sentiment. What a load of shit. It's like very... And then if you're asking like a loaded question, to your point, like you ask a loaded question, of course I'm not going to vote for that. But if you're asking it in a way that Albo wants you to ask it, like in a nice way, well, maybe you're going to get a different answer. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so shout out to Paulie. Hey, Paulie, good to see you, man. And Izzy. Izzy made a couple of comments there. I'm not quite sure whether there's a question there or what you're talking about there, Izzy. I don't know if you can clarify your question there.
There was a question. So the Commonwealth Games were supposed to be held here in Victoria. And Daniel Andrews, the most incompetent politician in the history of planet Earth, the one who locked down Victorians for 2 years or whatever it was, came out just yesterday and goes, cancelled. We're not having... So the process that a country or a state or a city goes through to try and win the Olympics or win the Commonwealth Games. The Commonwealth Games is just like kind of one step down from the Olympics, right? It's a big thing. And so they went through the procurement process. They won it. They were going to do this. They made all of these plans, and you come out and goes, no, we can't afford it.
Are they
just cancelled it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Imagine if the city came out and said, how we won the Olympics? But don't worry about it. No, we can't afford it.
Yeah.
That's what he's done.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Just mismanaged books, mismanaged accounts, and focusing on all of the wrong things. And yesterday throughout Twitter, there was like literally hundreds and hundreds of posts. I think it was trending on Twitter here in Australia for a little while. And, it's a big, long laundry list of all the things that he's failed at. Cancelled this, $10 billion here, $5 billion here, $100 million there, cancelled this, cancelled that, because they can't afford it because he can't manage the economy because he's a Labor premier. And Labor are socialist, and it all works fine until you run out of other people's money. And now he's out of other people's money. He has to cancel these things. He has to make some hard decisions. And they've had just the most horrendous hospital system in Victoria. There's all sorts of things, just an absolute basket case. And more people have left Victoria in the last year or so than at any time in Australian history. People are like, fuck this place, man. I'm fucking out of here. Anywhere's better than here.
It always amazes me when Australia has all these big issues going on. And I'm thinking, geez, there are like 400 people in Australia.
Sometimes I look at Ground News, right? So Ground News is a nice source for me because it shows me the world news and you can tailor it for yourself. It's actually a really good source. You should look at that if you've never seen it before.
Ground News? Okay.
So I look at like military and it's like Putin this and North Korea that and all of these things. And I like world news and it shows me all the world news stuff. And then I go local news, like man dies in car accident. There's just no news here, man. Like nothing happens here.
I mean, Australia is repeatedly like headline international news on something, right?
I don't know what. Nothing happens.
No. A lot happens. Like the banks not spending out any more money, and during the lockdowns, you guys had a very
we got hammered badly with that.
Boy,
yeah.
That during the worldwide flu there, you guys were in the headlines a lot.
There was a banking story that was trending in the last 2 days. A fella, he came out and he's a poker player, and he's playing poker at the casino. Won some money, went over to the ATM, deposited the money in the ATM. And everything is two-factor authentication, right? So you've got to confirm everything on your phone, and then he's putting it in. He put the money in the ATM, right? So he won. And in Australia, you're not supposed to, or the banks won't report you if it's about $10,000. So, and he said it's he doesn't disclose how much it is. He says well below the threshold of $10,000, nowhere near that amount of money. And I've done this several times before. But he put the money in his account, and as soon as he put the money in the account via the ATM, 10 minutes later he gets a call from the bank going, "Oi, it's from the fraud department at the bank. And he's like, well, he thinking somebody's got his card, and the fraud department's calling him saying, hey, did you make this purchase? And they said, hey, did you just put that money in the bank? And he goes, yep. And they said, where did you get it from? And he said, what? He goes, where did you get it from? Said, well, I acquired that legitimately and legally. I haven't done anything wrong. Well, where did you get it from? Well, I don't have to disclose that to you. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Your bank account's frozen.
Yep. There you go. And we've talked
froze his account for putting money in the account.
Yep.
Putting it in. Not taking it out, putting it in.
Yep. Yep. This is, the banks are not your friends.
Here we go.
The banks, yeah, boy.
I'm going to rile him up at the end of the show.
The banks are our adversaries. They are our enemies. Okay, banks are not here to help you. Any money you're putting in the bank is illegally not your money. And nowadays, if you try to pull your money out, they make you justify what you're going to spend it on. Oh, so what are you going to use this for? And then if it's a large amount that they don't want you taking out, they'll ask you things like, are you here under distress? Is somebody making you come here and make this withdrawal? I mean, first of all, am I going to say...
What about but we're seeing it on the deposit side now. Like I've not heard that story before, right?
Yeah, well, this is they're looking for ways to make our lives miserable. So now that bank closes the account, he's probably not going to get that $5 or $6 grand he put in, right? He's probably never going to see it. The bank just.
I'm not sure. I think I can't really tell. He put an update out on Twitter yesterday saying what had actually happened. He went into the branch and said to the branch manager, "What's going on? Can you unfreeze this?" And they were like, "No." And he couldn't get on the phone with them. He got on the phone, they hung up on him, the call got cut off, whatever. And then he went into the branch, Westpac Bank, by the way, let me just name him, Westpac Bank, and went in there, and the manager got the fraud department on the phone, and they went back and forth, and she was just relaying messages to him. No, you're not doing anything. The account's frozen until you tell us where it's from. And he said, can you give that to me in writing, please? And they were like, no, not giving you anything in writing, just frozen, bad luck. Whatever you do, ladies and gentlemen, do not bank with Westpac. Don't put your money there. Whatever you do,
or in the UK, NatWest.
Yeah.
And when we have a long list of other banks, we can probably mention here, but the show isn't that long. Listen, the banks not our friend. Listen, it's the old Nigel Farage effect going on, right? They're closing out people's accounts. We just did a segment on this, for crying out loud. For those of you who have watched the Hey Ed and the Unspoken Truth channel here, we just talked about this topic. The banks, crazy. The banks are erroneously debanking people, and you gotta say, well, why would they do that? Doesn't that go against their best interest? Listen, these banks, they answer to higher powers out there, and the higher powers in government and from the people out of Switzerland, they're giving marching orders to do certain things. They're checking boxes. Like with the ESG, so if that bank wants to be in favor with the right people, they're going to follow their orders, and you are peanuts in the scheme of things.
Yeah, you are absolutely irrelevant to their grander plans, and the amount of money that you have is completely
Get your money out of the bank.
There it is. Get some gold and silver. That's the way to solve it.
Give me a call. I'll set you up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap the show up. It's fun to be doing a live with you. We'll be back at the same time next week. Don't forget to head on over to The Unspoken Truth on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and where you get your audio content. And come on over onto Twitter and Telegram and follow us over there. Come over to Telegram, folks. The link's in the description below. And make sure you check out that interview with the Prime Minister. Once I've finished with the stream here, I'll go back and put the link in there. Check it out because it's worthwhile listening to. Ed, final comments, mate. Have you got a quote you want to close out the show with?
Nah, not really. God save the Queen.
God save the gold. Bye, everybody. See you next time.